The Giants figured it out, and they got their man. It's not yet signed, sealed, delivered. Still some details to work out, but the Giants are finalizing a 5-year deal with former Ravens coach John Harbaugh, making him one of the NFL's highest paid. That is a surprise to absolutely nobody that he's out there getting paid. But let's be real here. The Giants wanted their man. Every single coaching vacancy wasn't going to be filled until this one, and it didn't take long for the biggest and first domino to drop. Harbaugh looks like he's about to be a New York Giant.
Can you imagine being a New York Giant fan and getting to say that refreshing phrase it must feel to say that the Giants got it right? They got it right. After the years of Ben McAdoo and Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge and Brian Daboll going into the blue tent to get Jaxson Dart out of concussion protocol. Can you imagine just how miserable the last 15 years of being a Giants fan has been since their last playoff win in 2011? And today, if you're a Giants fan, you can wake up and the sun is shining brighter and the birds are singing a lovely little tune, because you have those two, by the way, and also Malik Nabers, and also John Harbaugh is your head coach. The New York Giants got it right. They have a competent football coach in the building. Will this come to fruition in the form of a Super Bowl? I don't know. John Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl. He's made some questionable decisions in big-time games and in the postseason. Let's not act like John Harbaugh doesn't have his warts. But what John Harbaugh is one of the most well-respected coaches in the National Football League. What John Harbaugh is a guy that has seen and has coached a lot of football games and has won a lot of football games. What the Giants have is a roster that right now on paper looks like it is constructed to win. You have a young and hopeful quarterback. You have Cam Scatto, who's one of the most exciting and young and energetic running backs in the league. Malik Nabers, an elite wide receiver that will come back healthy next year. And all of these pieces on the defensive front that the Giants have invested into over the last several years, it just feels like the only thing that's missing is, one, staying healthy, of course, and two, competent coaching. You get that and then some with John Harbaugh. I could not be more thrilled for the Giants.
Yeah, and look, and the clear answer to this, and look, before social media kills me on this, I'll just say this clearly. No matter what happens moving forward, the Giants got it right. I don't even really care how many games Harbaugh wins, because that's the variable none of us can know today. All we can know is, based on the information you have on hand, did you make the best decision? When you look across this coaching landscape with these candidates, there's certainly plenty of guys that are looking for their next job. There's plenty of retreads, and we're still trying to figure out which of the rising coordinators are best. But if you're the Giants, and you've had a lack of stability over and over and over again for the better part of a decade, and you do have young pieces that you believe are building blocks for a franchise, we got to ask yourself, do we want to roll the dice again on somebody that might be right? Or do we want to go with somebody that has been a proven commodity and a winner in this league for a very long time? Like, two things can be true. The time in Baltimore can be done, and that doesn't mean that it's not an absolute home run, amazing hire for the Giants. I think in part because of all of the talent you just mentioned. That's why I love this hire for New York. If we're talking about bringing in a Jesse Minter, or we're talking about bringing in any of these Clint Kubiak, or any of these young hot candidates that we're trying to figure out, let's remember that, yes, Ben Johnson has had tremendous success. That's not always the standard. That's not always the norm. So if you're the Giants, you're looking around and saying, do we really want to take this window where we have a bunch of young talent and spend 2 or 3 years learning with the head coach how to be a head coach? Or do we want to plug and play somebody that fixes the culture overnight, that sets a new standard overnight, that suddenly makes us competitive overnight? I believe that the Giants, with this roster that they have and the improvements they'll make in the offseason, and with a competent coaching staff, can actually make a push to be a playoff team. I believe in their talent that much. I believe Harbaugh can get the most out of them. Even if he doesn't, this is like when we were in high school and in math. You couldn't just write the answer. You had to show your work. If you show the work for the New York Giants, this is simply a perfect hire, because based on only the information we have today, there's nobody else today that's more qualified on the market, that's better on the market, or that will mean more to the Giants on the market. So no matter what the result is today, if you're a Giants fan, man, you're out there in the streets. You're out there swaggy walking. You're talking your talk. You got your guy. You got a reason for tremendous hope. And hope is something, when your team sucks, The thing that you have to find is the hope that you're going to use to sell everybody on next year. This is tremendous hope for the Giants.
And I think that the Giants have had tremendous hope. Bringing in Jaxson Dart, the amount of promise that you've seen from him, the amount of promise that you've seen from all of these young pieces. But what's been holding them back is leadership. What's been holding them back is competent development of some of these young players. And I think you bring up a fair point that, sure, there's probably plenty of young, up-and-coming coordinators that might be the next Kyle Shanahan and might be the next Sean McVay. They also might be the next Brian Callahan, or might be the next guy that we totally forgot about because he had a couple of years in the league and then just totally and completely fizzled out. It is a gamble whenever you're going with a young guy that has very little or even no head coaching experience in the National Football League. What you are getting is a certified, proven commodity in John Harbaugh. I do, though, Fitz, I do wonder what the power structure is going to look like in New York, because the Giants have retained general manager Joe Schoen. I would not have been shocked in the slightest if after the season the Giants wanted to move on from general manager Joe Schoen. John Harbaugh has expressed that he would like to take over general manager duties. Does that mean that he has final say? Does that mean that he is the one doing the drafting? I don't know, but he at least wants more say in roster construction. I mean, you look back in his time with the Ravens, you've had Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome. Those are two very, very well-respected general managers in the NFL. Joe Schoen is not even in that same stratosphere. So does John Harbaugh want kind of carte blanche, Bill Belichick kind of power, and Joe Schoen's just kind of there collecting checks because he's just happy to be there and happy to have a job? And who is going to have final say in the roster construction? Who's going to be doing the drafting? Who's going to be doing the signing? Who is the one that is in charge of constructing this roster for the future? That's the question that I have. Because if I'm the Giants and I'm bringing John Harbaugh in, I think it's fair to at least question who's really in charge here. John Harbaugh, who's been around this league for 20 plus years, John Harbaugh, who's won a Super Bowl, or Joe Schoen, who's most famous for being on Hard Knocks?
Yeah, I think that there's a very little possibility in my mind that Joe Schoen is anything other than a soldier reporting to John Harbaugh at that point. He might still have the title of GM, but he's executing Harbaugh's vision. Should be noted, Adam Schefter saying this morning on ESPN that as part of his presentation and pitch to the Giants, Harbaugh's intent is to bring Todd Monken with him as his offensive coordinator if Todd Monken doesn't get a head coach job somewhere else. He's interviewed in Cleveland. So many people trying to figure out what it means for the front office or for the coaching staff. My expectation, most people's expectations right now would be that Todd Monken will be the offensive coordinator working with Jaxson Dart in New York. So let me ask you, what's the more likely outcome next season? Next season, already, in only 1 year. Harbaugh leads the Giants to the playoffs, glory, or the Giants are picking in the top 10 in the draft in a year?
I think it's the playoffs. And of course, injuries can derail anything, but that's always on the table for any team across the 32 teams in the NFL. If the Giants can stay healthy and they're coached by John Harbaugh, I think it is much more likely that they find themselves in the postseason than they do with a top 10 pick. Now, that doesn't mean that I think the Giants are going to win the Super Bowl next year, but I think that there is a very realistic possibility that the Giants could go 10-7 and squeak into the playoffs. I mean, why not? With the question marks that the Eagles have, with the question marks that the Commanders have, with some of the defensive question marks that the Cowboys have, there's a lot of question marks in that division. Why not the Giants? I think that 9-8, 10-7 could absolutely be in the cards in year one for John Harbaugh. And if it's not next year, I think it would absolutely be the year after.
Yeah, this feels like when you look at the building blocks that are coming, I can't figure out exactly how a roster this talented turned out to be this bad this year. I think that you're right. There's a much better shot at the playoffs than a top 10 pick. This is where I'll be Debbie Downer for a remind everybody that no coach has ever won a Super Bowl with one team and turned around and won a Super Bowl with another as a head coach. So we've never seen a head coach win a Super Bowl with two NFL franchises. That's an important note here because Harbaugh has a Super Bowl. But let's be honest too. Like, part of the reason we're even talking about that is because it's Harbaugh with the Ravens. Like, if we were talking about Clint Kubiak, we wouldn't be saying, "Oh, can Clint get him to the playoffs in 1 year?" Like, that is just, it's such a reminder of how great this matching can be, this pairing can be, simply because of that. Let me ask you this then. When we look at it, What would have to happen for the Giants in your mind for the Ravens to turn around and feel like, oh man, we really messed this thing up?
I think it's the Giants winning a Super Bowl before Baltimore. I think I always use the Andy Reid Philadelphia Kansas City comparison for how fan bases might feel about moving on from a legendary head coach. And I think Philadelphia fans can feel like, okay, you know what, we're all good. We're all good, no harm, no foul, because they've won a couple of Super Bowls since Andy Reid was fired in Philly, and Andy Reid has won a couple of Super Bowls famously since leaving Philadelphia. So I don't think Eagles fans feel like they missed out or lost out on anything because they have Super Bowls themselves. I think right now the Ravens have a much clearer path to get to the Super Bowl and to win a Super Bowl, at least in the short term, before the Giants do. But if John Harbaugh breaks through and even gets to a Super Bowl, much less wins a Super Bowl before the Ravens get there or win one, I think Ravens fans are going to be looking around thinking, did we really make the right decision? Were we just a little bit impatient? Could we have given it at least a little bit more time? Ravens fans aren't waking up today and thinking that. They're thinking we made the right decision. Things didn't go well. We missed out on the postseason. We've blown far too many fourth quarter leads. We've fallen short in the postseason way too many times. We feel okay and we feel good about our situation right now. We feel very hopeful for the future. You might feel differently 3 to 5 years from now. Maybe you don't. Maybe the Ravens and the Giants each have Super Bowls and it's a happy little Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs world. But I think when your ex does better than you after you break up with them, that does make you feel some type of way. That hits the ego.
I think the variable here is what happens to Baltimore moving forward. And again, I've got whatever. I'm going to nickname this damaged fan syndrome because I'm a fan of a team that sucks. If you look all the way back to 2000, if you go all the way back since 2000, the Ravens had never had back-to-back losing seasons, ever. So, you know, as much as you're right, a Super Bowl for one and not for the other would certainly then make the Ravens fan base say, oh, man, I can't believe he had that left in him. But if we're sitting here in 10 years and the Giants year in and year out are winning 10, 11, 12 games, and over the course of that 10 years, Ravens fans are sitting here winning 5 or 6 games a year every year, they're going to miss Harbaugh. And this is where Ravens fans tell me, hey, I don't believe that's going to happen. I get you. I understand it. I said the very same thing after the Raiders lost the Super Bowl 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, man, I'd rather not even make the playoffs than sit here and have these heartbreaking losses in the playoffs. Is fine. And when the Raiders got rid of Gruden, it was like the first time. It was like, oh, that's no big deal, man. We're look at this team. We're great. We're going to be able to do this year in and year out. Guess what? 20 straight years of awful seasons. And suddenly you're like, yeah, it's not that easy. This is the caution, and I know Ravens fans don't really care about caution. Ravens fans believe that their organization is going to be just fine. I think that undervalues Harbaugh, and that overvalues the ability to simply replace a Hall of Fame level coach with another Hall of Fame level coach. I get it. You've had eras, especially Brian Billick before that, right? Like, you can go all the way back. The Ravens have had a really great run at finding head coaches. I love that for this franchise. But I believe that if this just starts, and, you know, I think there's too much talent for Baltimore for this to happen. But if Baltimore suddenly becomes one of those teams that's constantly in the top 10 in the draft again, man, I don't know. I think that would be enough for them to regret it.